All right, well, welcome everybody to our continuing workshop series here. My name is Tony Armour, founder of the Sunscreen Film Festival, former film commissioner, St. Pete Clearwater, film commissioner in Dallas for a little bit, and now head of production for Talon Entertainment. And we're excited. Yes, I'll pause for applause.
Woo!
Thank you. And excited to have Steve Demmler with us today. Steve, I'll let you give us your bio.
I'm Steve. I founded Talon Entertainment, Tony's employer. We are a creative equity and production company, so we do some private equity stuff. We also produce films, and also I have an MFA, and we're writing also. So we're generating our content, we're finding content, and we're also going out and buying related businesses that all kind of fit into a puzzle piece together to build something interesting.
Yes, all that stuff. Yeah. Well, oh, and applause for, yes, somebody was like, I should applaud too. Yes, thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. It's fun being back at UT's campus. I taught here 10 years ago as an adjunct for a little bit, and so it's been kind of cool to start doing these workshops. It's like I get to sort of teach again, but I don't get paid for it.
That's how being a teacher works.
That's right. Yeah, minimal pay at best.
Lots of hours.
Yes, exactly. So you all are here because the subject of this workshop is screenwriting, but kind of, what do producers, production companies, what do people look for in a screenplay? Kind of how do you get your screenplays out there and get it made? And so Steve and I will just kind of chat a little bit. I'll ask him some questions, and then we'll throw it out to you guys, and you guys can ask questions, and it's going to be super informal, but we'll just have a little bit of a discussion, basically. That work for you?
We'll have a chat.
Yeah. How many people in the audience are screenwriters or want to be screenwriters? So almost everybody, all but one. The guy who is
we'll
an attorney.
Figure you out.
He's an attorney. He introduced himself
Gotcha.
last workshop,
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
he's just spying, which is totally fine. So Steve, I guess to start out, you as a writer, talk about sort of your path as a writer, because you are, I guess we could say, new to entertainment, but not new to entertainment because you have a background going back to, Saturday Night Live many, many, many years ago.
Yeah. So I guess I probably should do that. I started my career in entertainment catching cue cards at Saturday Night Live when I was 14, which is illegal. Is under child labor laws, but my father was chief props at Saturday Night Live for a long time. So started there, wound up on his crew. But for me, very quickly, the most exciting part was the writing, and it became what I wanted to do. And I was there about 120 episodes or so, 150. I don't actually know how many episodes I was there for. But ultimately, I decided I really loved the prospect of not stressing about food and shelter, so I went into finance, which seemed to promise a straighter path to that, and kind of chickened out and left for about 13 years and worked in hedge funds and private equity firms around the world. And then for me, I always wrote for myself, but it was really a personal practice and a for me thing. And then just before the pandemic, I moved here, and part of what I was doing was deciding to pursue the one thing I've always wanted to do my whole life, which was write. However, I'm very pragmatic, so the way I approached it was, what will differentiate me from everybody else writing? And for me, it was an understanding and background in building businesses and structuring deals. So I thought, I bet I can put together a business to produce some stuff, and if I show up to these Hollywood agencies and managers and say, I have a bucket of cash, that they would open their door. And then it would be easier to get to know them by producing their work and then kind of sneak my work in. So that was what Talon was born from. I apologize if this is too vulgar for a school, but Talon exists so I can fuck off and write is my operating principle still. And Tony knows this as well. Talon's meant to serve the creativity of its team. However, we started to have some success pretty quickly in producing. We did many films, but for example, one comes out this Friday that we did with Elijah Wood in New Zealand. We had a film premiere in competition at Cannes this year that Paul Schrader directed and wrote. Has Jacob Elordi in it and Richard Gere and Uma Thurman. So producing took off.
What are the names of these films that are coming out this Friday?
Bookworm is the Elijah Wood film this Friday, and the other one is Oh, Canada. We had one woo. It's strong woo. Thank you. Anyways, so as that took off, I was like, now is the time to strike and let them know I write. So I am represented at WME, William Morris Endeavor, as a producer, and I said, here's my writing. And immediately all our agents went dead inside, and their inner monologue played out loud, and it said, the Monopoly man wants me to read his scribbles. And like I could tell they didn't care to read what I wrote at all. And I learned very quickly that success over here in one thing didn't confer it into writing. So I sort of decided, oops, this all might have been a mistake, so I have to figure out how to get that credibility. So in tandem with running the business, I got myself into the MFA in dramatic writing at Tisch, and then submitted some stuff to managers who I knew and who would read, and got myself signed as a writer. And now the two things are sort of coming together where I'm a producer working with different writers, directors, and production companies around the world, and slowly working on my craft, right? And producing finished screenplays that are increasingly more interesting, increasingly better, but learning what I'm learning from actually producing things and figuring out what scripts I feel like I can make and make money on, and letting that inform, at least to some degree, my writing. And now I'm here at the University of Tampa.
And fast forward to today. So that's not a traditional path that a lot of people are going to take or going to be able to take. You're not going to spend 15 years in hedge funds before you jump into writing.
And you shouldn't.
But from a practical perspective for writers, WME and previously CAA are sending you projects saying, hey, here's a project that we think we'd like you to put money into. So when a script comes across your virtual desk, so to speak, what is it that when you take a look at that attracts you to it or makes you think this is something you might want to get involved with?
Yeah, it'll be different for different producers, but I stand by this, that if it's not a compelling story, nobody's going to waste their time and energy and resources trying to make it. I think I repeat a lot of times, like trying to get a feature film made is like being punched in the face repeatedly until eventually you're dead or the film is made. And to do that, you have to care about it, right? So like the story has to be moving or funny or scary or whatever that you're aiming for, right? It has to actually affect the reader. And so that's the first thing. So if I read something and I'm not like, this is awesome, then I just delete it and move on. I don't care who's in it. I mean, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong about that, clearly from the box office. For example, I read Bottoms and I was like, this will never work. And I was so wrong. But that's the point. It's like, it has to connect. And it's because everybody's different, right? Like different things will connect with different readers. So I think something to learn from this, right, is one, your work has to be great. And then two, who you send it to should be researched, right? Like don't just send it to big producer A because you want them to make your movie. They need to be right for the script you're sending them. And different producers have different tastes and have different track records, and I would spend some time thinking about that before it was sent.
Yeah, and so for those of you how many people were at the last workshop we did, the film finance and distribution? Okay, so a bunch of you were for that one too. So I'm not going to repeat all of the stuff from that one because a lot of that was geared towards, if you are a writer or a creative, what you need to know to get your project made, because so much of it is beyond just your writing. So much, if you're a writer, sometimes you have to figure out how to find. It's not just finding someone who will make it, but finding a way to put the money together, put the project together, and everything else. So if anybody wants to watch that, it's on the Sunscreen Film Festival YouTube channel and is also on the UT, Destiny, what's it on for UT? The FMX bulletin board for UT as well, where you can watch that video if you want to hear me drone on for an hour and a half about finding money for your projects. And so something you said, Steve, is obviously a project has to connect with you personally, and people have completely different tastes. What are films, or what's something that, like, when you read it, is it a particular genre, a particular style, something that when you start reading something, you're like, oh, I like this?
That's tough, and it's also the most common thing I'm asked from not just writers. I just got back from Los Angeles where I did 19 meetings with different production companies in 4 days, and like every single one was like, well, what kind of genre are you doing? And I think my answer is character driven. I'm really compelled by stories that have interesting and complex characters. I'll make a rom-com. I don't care. I'll make 2 rom-coms back to back, and then sci-fi and horror, or a psychological drama, or I'm about to do one in April called Atonement, is the name of the film, with Christopher Abbott and Julianne Nicholson. That's just something you've seen before, probably, like an Iraq vet come home and he deals with stuff, but it's just incredibly moving and beautifully written with a different take on that. And I found that beautiful, so we'll do that also. So for me, it's characters.
Shooting in Dallas.
Shooting in Dallas, and Amman, Jordan.
And in Jordan, the Middle East, yes.
Yeah.
Which that should be interesting.
I got to go location scout there. Now I'm off topic. To location scout for this film where Jordan is standing in for Iraq. Obviously, with everything in the Middle East, a lot of business has stopped, right? Like, it's not going to Jordan because they're worried about safety. So as the most junior producer on this project, they sent me to confirm it was safe. But it was amazing. I showed up, and it turns out in Jordan, I'm way off topic now, but the Crown Prince is the head of the film commission. So I was picked up in a Rolls Royce, and just nobody checked my passport, which was not a good thing as far as I was concerned. And I was just chauffeured around Jordan like I was a Crown Prince. So it was amazing and also deeply terrifying.
In the United States, as a film commissioner in 2 different locations, I am not the Crown Prince, nor will I ever be.
Rolls-Royce.
But I do not have a Rolls Royce. But I like the fact that the head of the film commission is also the Crown Prince.
Yeah, it was pretty
it's a
exciting.
priority for Jordan, apparently.
I guess. Yeah. No, it's just an industry they're trying to build, right? So it's a best foot forward thing. But anyways, I think your question was like, what kind of stories interest me? Right?
Yes.
To go back to it, it really is character. And I think there's that old thing where like people are worried about if you're writing a horror film, like you're doing a haunted house film or something, right? Or like, why are they making another Frankenstein film? It's because you've never written that one before. Or Guillermo, I can't do it today. G. Del Toro has never written one before, right? Like, as long as you bring your voice to the character, that will come through to readers as being a unique take on something. If you're earnest in building the character.
How important is structure? Like when you're reading a screenplay, and structure it's there for a reason because it helps you tell your story, but are you like, oh no, page 17, this was supposed to happen and it didn't, so this thing's going in the garbage. Talk a little bit about story structure, and for the audience, how experienced is everybody? I guess on a scale of how many feature screenplays have you written? Okay, we have.
That's not a raise your hand question. That's a.
You know what? You're right. Yeah. How many people in the audience have written a feature screenplay? Is what I meant to say. There we go. So we have a handful. And everybody else, short films. Have you written short films? Yes. So a lot of shorts have been written. And of the short film people, how many of you have a feature screenplay that you're working on or want to write? Okay, there's some. Okay, good. Just kind of getting a sense of where everybody's at in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, structure is critical for a lot of reasons, but I do want to push back against one, and it's like there's the very popular like 3-act save the cat kind of thing where like this happens on page 10 and this happens on page 67. It's your low point. All of those are true things and pieces of a 3-act story. But whether or not they happen in those pages kind of doesn't matter if it's organic, right? Like the Save the Cat thing arose from looking at a lot of screenplays and saying this is basically when these things happen. It doesn't need to be so rigid as to hit the page count if it's right for the story. And then the other thing is there are so many great films that are not 3-act structures, that they're 2-act or there's a host of alternative structures. So I think as long as you're putting like very intelligent thought into which structure you're choosing, and not because you think it's fun or different or weird or normal, right? As long as it's the best one for the story you're trying to tell, that will become evident, as it will if you pick a weird structure when it should be a 3-act film.
Yeah, but at the same time, you kind of have to know structure in order to break structure.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. You have to understand. Yeah, you have to understand. I mean, you start with the 3-act structure because it's the most prevalent, right? And once you understand that and know that, you can look at other forms and other stories and steal from that, right? You can structure it as a 2-act, like a play, right? Like Sunset Limited with Tommy Lee Jones and Sam Jackson, which probably nobody's seen. Great reference, Steve.
Everyone's going to go look it up now.
Yeah, it's not even that good. I don't know. It was just a 2-act film.
But it had Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel
But it's
Jackson.
Tommy Lee Jones and Sam
Yeah.
Jackson. My point is, like, structure needs to serve the particular story you're trying to tell, instead of using structure as like a bell or whistle to try and sell it. Be like, look, it's cool, or it's different, or it's don't pay attention to structure. It's normal, I swear. Like, it needs to add a dimension to the story.
Yeah, how important for you is outlining, like when you are in your process? I think you and I have talked a little bit about this before. Like, I know there are writers who will be like, I spent 6 months outlining my story, and I'm like, my God, if I spend 6 minutes outlining my story, I'll take like that Save the Cat and like look at it and be like, all right, this, and and you fill out like a rough outline, and then I just want to jump in and start writing. Like, for you, like, what's your outlining process like?
Before I did the MFA, I would say I've never outlined anything, and I think I would have had a reason, but it would have been probably an ignorant and stupid reason. I think it's just because I didn't want to do that. I just kind of wanted to write. But I have learned about myself 2 things. One, I do find the voices for different characters by writing. So for me, I need to generate a lot of pages that ultimately might not mean anything to learn about the characters. But 2, I also learned that not an outline, but if I like to write a 6 to 8 page treatment, so just a prose version of the story where each page represents 15 minutes of screen time, and I keep that in mind as I go through, so that's for pacing and structure, right? And I found that's really helpful, because then I kind of get what I'm trying to do on the page, but once I start writing, I found that first 15 minutes is pretty close, and then it starts to veer like this. So by the time I get to the last 15 minutes, that treatment is worthless to me. Yeah. But the act of it allowed me to have a basic understanding of the world and to get going.
Yeah, I mean, and so often by the time you get to a third draft of a script, it's almost unrecognizable from the first draft a lot of times.
Yeah. So this is me patting me on the back now. I've been working on one for like a year. And I'm on draft 4 or 5, Standstill it's called, and it's so different from where I started. And I thought that first draft, which I did this outline for, this treatment for, and work through, but giving yourself time and space away from it, and time to come back and iterate, and not be precious about changing what your original idea was, and looking at the story and be like, well, I really like this scene, but it doesn't actually serve the story in the most potent way, and being willing to change that is, I think, a really important skill to develop over time. And it served that project well, because I just found out it's gotten into the Sundance Writer Lab, which is pretty exciting for me.
That's awesome. We can pause for applause for that one.
Pause for applause. But it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's great, and I need little check boxes so people believe me that I can write instead of just produce, but that was an exercise in iteration. Like, if I submitted that, any other draft of that, I would have been laughed at, I assume. Laughed out the door.
And when you're going in and you're making changes to the script from draft 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and so on and so forth, how are you evaluating what needs to be changed? Is it just like, all right, I'm going to take 2 weeks away and I'll come back to it and read it and be like, oh my God, this is garbage. I need to go in and come and change this here. Are you getting feedback from people and coverage from different companies?
Yeah. Every time I read something I wrote, I think it's garbage, until I'm talking about it to somebody else, and then I think it's awesome. And I don't know why that is. But I think for the first draft and a half or 2 drafts, I don't share it with anybody. But somewhere around that second to third draft, I have a small group of people I'll share it with for input. On occasion, I'll send it to a coverage service like The Blacklist or something off of Coverfly.
Screencraft is the one I like.
Yeah, Coverfly is like an aggregator, so you can do Screencraft and all that through them. Coverfly.com and Blacklist.com. I'll use them, but that's usually for later drafts where I'm not looking for like generative story ideas, but more
it's not a first draft
polish
kind of thing.
Ideas, or did I lose do I introduce like a ticking clock in scene 15 and forget about it, which happens also when you're coming back and forth to a project, right? So I think for those kind of things, I find it valuable.
when, you know, back to the producing side, if there's a script, like let's talk about Atonement that you identified and you were like, hey, this is interesting. I think this is something that we would like to do. What's that process like? Because that came through an agency that came to you. So what's that process like when agency brings a script to you and says, we would like you to do this? How do those conversations then start and go?
Yeah, there's a variety of ways. So we either find the script and build a whole package and business around a film, or they exist outside of us and people come to us either for extra hands producing or financing, you know, partial financing, or I don't know, there's a million different things. But Atonement in particular had been optioned by a company called Star Thrower. They did King Richard, they did Ingrid, you know, for which they were Oscar nominated for Best Picture, and then Ingrid Goes West, a bunch of other stuff. And basically, because of those films that I was just saying, they've grown so large, and they're doing, you know, they have $25, $50 million films going with Fox and Sony and all these things, right? But Atonement's a $3 million indie film for a story they love with a young director for his first film who they just want to support. But given the size of their actual big projects, they do not have the time to produce this film. Enter me, you know, the smaller indie producers. So they were introduced to me by WME saying, Star Thrower, you guys want to make this? You don't have the time. Steve does have the time. He wants to work with better producers on big projects and has facility space in Dallas. So I was able to kind of offer value to the project, right? They didn't need just money. They needed hands, like capable hands willing to do the hard producing work. And also Talon happens to own an 11-acre film studio in downtown Dallas where we could shoot a bunch of this and be creative on cost and what we charge it. So once I like the story, to answer your other question, once I'm in on a script, the next thing I look for is, can I add value to this that nobody else can? Yeah. Because otherwise they don't need, like I don't need to be there otherwise.
Well, and so, you know, $3 million, while it's a small budgeted film in the scope of, you know, this world of Star Thrower and films and everything, $3 million is a lot of money for everybody in this room, and nobody in this room is coming up and saying, hey, will you, well, don't, but you afterwards you'll say, hey, here's my $3 million movie, will you produce this? I want to talk a little bit about sort of, because we have a lot of people who are kind of thinking about doing their first features. You're either writing your first features, you've got your first feature script. How many people have made a feature film? Okay, so we've got two that have made their feature film. So round of applause for those two, because that is really hard to do. So something I talked about in the previous workshop was making your no budget, low budget feature film just to do it and get it out of the way, because you've got to make your feature first. You talk a little bit about, and so if you want more kind of detail like that, the whole kind of point is you've got to make it, so why think that you've got to raise even $500,000 or $200,000? If you've got friends and a camera, go make a feature film with whatever you have access to, because you need to make something first and be a feature filmmaker to move it. Because we asked these two gentlemen and then they said they made a feature film, but we didn't ask them how much money they spent on it. They could have spent $1 million, they could have spent $10,000. It doesn't matter. They made features, and so now they want to take that step up to that next thing. So kind of my question, Steve, is, you know, for somebody who's looking to make that first feature film, you know, what are they going to write? You're not going to take your sci-fi epic and think you can make that for nobody. Like, what should someone write if they want to just make that first feature to make it?
That's a good question. I think the most contained, meaning as few scenes as possible, as few locations as possible, all achievable, not like top of Empire State Building day, like a small number of locations, but really something personal, right? Because if you make it for $7,000, and by the way, a $7,000 feature film has won Sundance before.
My $6,000 feature did not win Sundance, but I made it.
But one could have.
It could have, yes.
Primer won Sundance after being made for $7,000. But whether it's $7,000 or $50,000 or $200,000, it's not going to look and feel like a $3, $5, $20 million film, right? And you don't have to worry about that because nobody watching it will expect it to. What you need to prove is that the story's really moving, and that despite cash and production constraints, which everybody making films is aware exists, that you're still moved, right? Like you're still connected to the film, you're still interested in it, and you still watch it from start to finish. So I would say be practical, like write something where you know everybody who owns everything you need location-wise, right? With a couple characters, not too many. Just be economical in what you're doing, but make sure it's personal and meaningful, and not stress about not being able to have big VFX or if it looks homemade. Like that, it doesn't matter. Talon is doing a film called The White Horse. It's a horror film by this kid, Patrick Picard. His is a bit more expensive. He did a $150,000 film for his first feature. But that's not that, and that is a lot, but it's not $3 million, $5 million, $8 million. He was able to cobble that together over 18 months. And just based on that and his second script, Elijah Wood's producing his movie, and I'm not allowed to say anybody who's in it yet. And it's well cast, and we're going to shoot it this February in Louisville, right? And he has a full budget, full support. And the feedback when we shared his feature film, because we shared it with the cast we were trying to get, the talent we were trying to get in the film, all of them were like, wow, he made it for what? It was so good. They didn't care that the camera was kind of like an old shitty camera. It's what he could afford, and it's not the most important part.
Yeah, I think filmmakers get so obsessed with, I have to shoot on an Alexa, I've got to shoot on the Red or the this or the that or whatever else. When the camera is just, shoot on your cell phone, it doesn't matter.
You can make a feature film compelling with almost anything now. I mean, what Patrick was good at with that much money, right? Like, he might not have had all the trappings and trimmings like production, G&E, camera and G&E wise, but every frame was intelligently composed. Like everything in it was in a pretty spot, right? Like they were photographs. They just looked like old photographs. You know what I mean? And like, no, the actors weren't Daniel Day-Lewis, but they played their parts well, right? He directed them well. And their deficiencies weren't put on the director. They're like, wow, without trained actors, you did a pretty great job like setting this up. And so I think don't stress about the money too much, right? Stress about making a meaningful story.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably all have your idea of your big budget film that you want to make. There's the film that you want to make, and then there's the film that you can make right now. And so make the film that you can to get to the one that you want to make.
Yeah, your best first film is the one you make.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's true.
every time I talk about my first feature, I always follow it up by saying I don't want anyone to ever see it. Because it's just, 20 years ago, your first feature for $6,000. It's embarrassing to look at. But that was the thing to then people were like, oh, you made a feature film? Will you help me make my feature film? Mm-hmm. What are you doing next? Do you want to do another feature film? And so now you're labeled as a feature filmmaker. You're not a short filmmaker anymore. Yeah. So people want to work with someone who's made a feature. So Steve and I can sit up here and chat all day because that's what we do usually anyways, but I know a lot of you have questions, so why don't we start letting the audience ask some questions, and we'll do this for a while. And Destiny here is going to be our microphone person, and we'll bring the microphone to you since this is being recorded so that the questions can be heard on camera as well. Thank you, Destiny, who is amazing and does a wonderful job here at the University of Tampa. All right, questions. Who has a question? I know you have questions. Don't sit there without raising your hands. Okay, in the back. Thank you.
I guess maybe just giving other people time to think of questions, but it's every single thing that you guys just said is entirely analogous to a startup company. I'm just like sitting here and I'm like, what world did I just... It's like you're saying that every movie is a startup company. Because I have a startup company, and it's getting punched in the face every day until I'm dead, and I think I'm about there. So I'm like...
Yeah.
And the low budget, like, don't worry about the top stuff. It's that stupid, simple product that has all the value, but none of the bells and whistles, that just delivers what people want, and, like, people actually want it. And it's like, the magic of doing that, it's so hard. Like, it's like...
And that's a great point, that every single script that you write is a startup company.
That's
your business plan for a startup company.
Yeah, I all the time to explain how I produce to other potential partners is the script is the business plan, the writer directors are the founders, and I'm the VC. And once I choose to bet on you, I'm not going to mess around and tell you what the business should be. I'm the guardrails. And as long as you're playing within the agreement we made for your startup capital, my job is to just help you do your thing. Not every producer produces that way. Some are much more creatively pushy, I guess. But because of what you just said, that's how I approach it for sure.
Do you guys?
I was just going to say, and Kyle's company is Mosho Boga, which, if anybody wants to look up, is actually very cool.
I have
and
a
it's
movie app.
Great film-related app. So look it up. Just a little shout out for you there for asking the first question.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, here we go. Now the questions are coming. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And then we'll bounce around.
Hello. So my question is, for people who are somewhat in the middle between a short film and a feature, so for example, television show or pilot, do you feel the rules are similar or different?
It's a great question. We just shot a television pilot that I produced here over the summer. We were here, I think, 3 days we shot around campus.
Late August.
Yeah,
right? Last week August.
Doesn't matter. But it's called The Feather Detectives. I'll send a link. I don't think it's different. I think it's the same thing, right? You have to produce different materials, sort of, if you're trying to sell a series, right? Like you have to have your pilot. It helps to have a Bible, an episode breakdown for 1 to 2 seasons, depending on if it's a limited series or what you're trying to do. So you have to produce a little more. But at its core, right, it's the same thing. Are the characters compelling? And now it's a little different. Like films, and I don't mean this strictly speaking. Like films are one shot and kind of like change driven, like what happens over time. Whereas in TV, it's about characters, and oftentimes the changes to them necessarily are very slow, right? Because they have to, like Walter White in Breaking Bad, moves over time. But if he had a huge jump from nice, sick teacher to evil drug villain in episode 2, it would make no sense. So the way you approach it's a bit different, but at its core, it's about the people in the script.
I think obviously the financing aspect is going to be different for TV versus.
Yeah, if that's what you're asking, it's way different.
Yeah.
Television finance is a tough game right now. I would say that market is in shambles. However, opportunity is born out of chaos, right? So that is, in my opinion, part of the reason I've pushed so hard. I started Talon during COVID, right? Like it's when we started doing it. We financed a film in St. Pete, the debt, and kept going from there because chaos knocks other players out, and it causes trouble for the establishment, and that's when you have the opportunity to come in and try something new, which is what Talon is trying to do. So a dose of reality, like the TV market is horrendous right now. It won't always be, right? And something will change that, and so there's opportunity there.
Great. All right. Yes, sir, right here. The hat.
Thank you. Maybe could you tell us something about the short film Kill Them with Kindness? Yeah, because you
Sure. Yeah, I can.
You get 3 different characters, like 3 different faces in the same movie. How hard is first written and then produce?
Sure.
And then direct?
And edit.
How is this tense? Session between these 3 different characters in the same movie?
Sure. So this is an example of what Tony said, where you make something to kind of exercise your creative muscle and to show that you can make it, though you may not want people to see it some number of years in the future. Kill 'Em with Kindness is a short I wrote and that we shot in 2020 during COVID. And I wrote it, I directed it, I edited it, I sound designed it, I am the judge, the executioner, the jury, all of it. We shot it so over 3 days, 2 days in my house and 1 day outside around my neighborhood, because that was what was available and cost effective. And as far as how to make it work, right, that was a unique situation because it was August 2020, so the entire crew had not been working for months, so I hired a larger than necessary crew as sort of a give back, I was new to the neighborhood too, so I was using that short to meet the crew. That's how I met Tony.
Yeah.
I just cold emailed him when I moved to Tampa. I wasn't in the business yet. I just figured out he was a film commissioner, not sure what that meant at the time. but I wrote him and said, "Hi, Tony, I don't need your money, but I'm trying to make a short film and need to meet people." And I think his response was something along the lines of, people don't usually ask the film commissioner not to give them money. This is interesting. And that's how we got to know each other. And that was just a case of, I used making something as a way to meet other creatives in the area, and I worried less about how it came out and more about finishing it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Finishing is super important. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of to make a short, to start a short, finish a short. Like, that's one thing. Like, if you're writing a short,
It's the
finish
same
it.
thing as a writer.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of people who say, "Hey, I'm a writer." I'm like, "I would love to read a feature you wrote." They're like, "Well, I haven't ever finished a feature." I was like, "Oh, well, what are you writing? What kind of writer are you?" And they're like, I write movies." And I'm like, "What kind of, I disagree, because a writer writes, right? And if you're a feature writer, you write features, and that necessarily requires finishing them. You don't need to have 30, right? You need to have one that's finished, and then you're a feature writer. But it's hard to finish, because they're complicated. It takes a long time. It's constant, at least for me, it's constantly demoralizing and screaming into a pillow, but you have to get all the way through and put fade out.
Well, I think there's another question there, because there's a process. Like, my process is when I finally, there are many things that I want to write and need to write, and I'm like, I really should write that, and I don't. And that could be like months, it could be a year. I mean, like, I haven't started writing this thing. But when I do, when I finally make that decision, and I be like, I'm writing this thing, I'm writing at least 5 pages a day, every single day for a month. So 30 days, 5 pages a day, that's 150 pages if you go that for. Some days I'll write 10, sometimes I'll write 20, but never less than 5, and make myself do 5 a day until it's done. And so that's like a process that I know in 1 month I will have a feature script. It might not be good, or it might not be great. It can always get better, but you've got to get it like out and completed, all of it from beginning to end, to then make changes to it. What's your process from like getting yourself from beginning to end?
A lot of crying. Copious amounts of self-hate. Both of those things are true, I think. But my actual process, as I referenced before, I usually start from like a scene or an idea or like a moment between characters, and I usually just let myself write that moment, and for as short or as long as it takes, because that gets me thinking about who they are, and she couldn't really say this if this hadn't happened to her, so now I know another scene I have to write, and it kind of builds organically from there. And once I get going like that, then I do this prose treatment now, where it's the 6 to 8 pages, and say, like, we try to write the story that way. Each paragraph makes sense after the one before it and before the one after it. And then when I go back to actually write, let's see, I sit in Starbucks or a coffee shop and stare at my computer and feel sad. And then I start to write, and then at some point I start writing, and I just stop, whether it's, even for me, and I have the same rule for exercising, which will become obvious when I say what this rule is. And as long as I write a line of dialogue, I can be done and feel like I wrote that day, and I don't feel bad about myself for it. And the corollary is, if I show up at the gym and curl one weight, I'm like, did it. And I find oftentimes I'm there, and I did one, so I should do a couple more. And you do it, right, because you started. And so for me, it's the same way. And once I've written some number of pages, 15, 20, something like that, I always start the next writing session by reading it and just making tweaks and edits, because that's how I get back into the mindset for that story, like just messing with what came before. And eventually that's either generates an idea or so boring that I'm back to creating something new. Yeah. But I have to somehow reconnect each time.
Yeah, you go back and read it and be like, where am I at? What am I doing? Okay, and you kind of get into it. And I know I try not to obsess over the first whatever you've written. Like, you've written those first 10 pages, and then you could obsess over it and write those first 10 pages for a month and keep writing and rewriting and rewriting. You just got to go. You just got to get it through and move on.
Yeah, you just have to get through it, right? Like, I think great scripts are made in the edit, and you can't get to editing your script and revising your script unless you finished it, right? And so it's really on the nose exposition. It doesn't matter until you're going back to fix it, if that helps you figure out what you're doing and where the characters are and where they need to go, right? Like, just get through it, and then you can worry about it after.
Yeah. More questions? right here.
I just want to piggyback off of her question because I'm developing a very niched reality TV dating show. So what is your opinion on that? Do you have any experience with that? Like, what is your advice?
I mean, I
know
suppose I could give
anything?
advice. My experience is zero. I haven't done any non-scripted work, so I'm not familiar. Advice would be find someone who has and talk to them instead of me. The back door into any room is when somebody inside opens it for you, right? So spending time, not in a gross transactional way, but spend time getting to know people, and eventually they'll invite you into the party and out of the rain.
Reality's hard. Over the
I don't know anything about
last
it.
20 years or so, I've been involved in shooting, I can't remember how many, multiple different versions of reality shows. Random cooking show, one thing called Soccer Moms of Tampa Bay that we shot.
You all know that.
Yes,
No?
it was actually involved like the Rowdies, the ownership of the Rowdies before it was owned by the Rays, and some random stuff. And they go different places and do different things. They're really hard to do. The problem is, like, if you're doing a reality show, you want to try and shoot the whole thing first and then go sell it, and because then you can just syndicate it, because you've created the syndicated thing, and then you go and you can take it to different TV markets like NatP and some others and Real Screen, and then just go take it out there, and you're just syndicating it because it's done. It's really hard to just pitch a reality idea and for somebody to make it. That happens. It's very rare. Same thing with like shooting a reality pilot and then getting somebody to come and make it. That's really tough and rare as well. I don't know how many there. I'm not really familiar with reality TV festivals other than Real Screen, which is a conference focusing on just reality, basically, and then NatP, which is a TV conference that takes place in Miami every year. But
I do want to say for scripted TV, we're producing, Talon's producing real stuff. The pilot we shot here is called a spec pilot, meaning nobody asked us to make this thing. We just decided to. The script won some money from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and Film Independent and the city of Tampa. So that's where the budget came from. And I hired the team, we cast it and made it on spec, which means, again, nobody asked us to. And even though I've put films in Cannes and Sundance, and we've sold films to Lionsgate and Vertical and Netflix, nobody will buy this. Almost with a high degree of probability, nobody is going to buy it. But I'm going to send it to all of the HBO. I'm going to send it to everybody anyway and ask them to. And the reason we made it, and the reason I'm going to do that, is my hope is they'll invite me in and be like, hey, this was really made very well. We don't want it, but we do have this script. Would you, and now we know you can produce it. Will you produce it? This thing we actually want. Again, great job. We're not buying it, but how about you work on this? And that's how you build credibility, because now we're not TV producers who haven't produced TV or writers who haven't written. We've made a thing, right? So even in this case, if you have more than one project, for example, make one and do the best you can, and then use that to show people that you can make these things, and then go about building a partnership kind of organically with somebody who has a foot in, or a way in.
You were at the last workshop, and I talked about grants. Like, there's so many grants out there that you can get for a variety of different things. NoFilmSchool.com has a great list of just like grant after grant after grant after grant that you can apply for, and find ways to get some money that way. All right, who else? There were a few more hands. Yes, over here in the corner, or right here, or there. Either one. He's had his hand up for a while.
It's all good.
His arm's shaking.
All right. So you've talked about what you should do as a writer, but what are some things that you should not do as a writer, or like some consistent mistakes you see when scripts come across your desk?
Is that in the writing itself, or as a person trying to get your project out there?
Both, or whatever's easiest to answer.
We can do both.
Go for it.
Let's see. When we first started, we got a lot of what's called unsolicited scripts, meaning they're not coming to me through an agency or through managers. They're coming just from people I meet that I don't know or have a relationship with, and that we didn't ask for. Like, I didn't request a script from. I can't tell you the percentage, but it has to be between 80 and 95 of those scripts that are just riddled with formatting and spelling errors, as if like grammar, they're just unreadable oftentimes. And there's too many good writers out there for me to spend a minute of time on scripts that aren't formatted or spelled or grammar checked. It's almost disrespectful to send it thinking I'm going to ignore all of these things because something underlying is so brilliant that is going to shock me into working on it. So I think that's one. The thing as a writer that I would suggest not to do, or I'm about to, I want you to know I'm absolutely a hypocrite, is not to say you've written something or it's finished or is in a state it isn't actually in, just because you think it's a shot you have and you don't want to pass up on it, right? So if I was like, do you have, you say you have a feature script and I'm like, how is it? And you're like, it's done, I can send it to you in 2 days, but you haven't written it yet. Please don't do that, because what you send is going to be bad. No matter how good of a writer you are, it's going to be really bad. Having said that, have I done that? I certainly have. Once, right? And not again. So I think that also, just don't misrepresent the state of the project.
Yeah, and I think too, just one of the first things you mentioned there was the number of, LinkedIn. The number of, I don't check LinkedIn often, maybe every couple of weeks I'll pop on there, or sometimes I'll do it a few days in a row, but it's flooded with, hey, I've got this $2 million film, can you give me $2 million to make my movie, and here's my script and my pitch deck. For people you've never met before in your entire life that just think, oh, well, I should ask this random person I've never met for life-changing money. You wouldn't do that in normal life. Why is that normal in this particular industry? And because it is so relationship-based, and it's just kind of weird.
I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do, not to not answer your question, right? Like, they may teach you, I'm going to make stuff up, I don't really know, right? Like, bold your slug lines, or don't bold your slug lines, or bold your capitalized character name the first time they appear, or don't. None of those things matter to me, right? Like, for me, I just want it to be readable and clean. It's about the story, so do whichever makes you happy. Don't stress that. Things like don't write more than 4 action lines in a row, because then it's hard to read. Now I'm going to do the brag thing again because I can't help it, and it's the film business. Yesterday I got slipped Charlie Kaufman's next script that he's directing, and there's like a page and a half of action text, like just a block of it, and I was enthralled the whole time. So don't stress those things, right? Like, the conventions need to be there, and if it serves the story, if you're doing something like that, right, where you're like, this monologue is going to last 5 pages, it better work dramatically, but don't not do it because somebody told you it's not the right structure or not the right rules, right? Like, if it works dramatically, do it. Just make sure the format, make sure the grammar and the format, basic formatting is correct.
Yeah, but the whole screenplay shouldn't be like that. It's like,
No, that's a monologue.
Yeah.
It's a stage play.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
again, I think it goes back to you have to know the rules in order to break the rules.
Yeah. Also, I'll say something that people don't do a lot is I'll read a screenplay and be like, man, this would be a really good pilot if it was 30 pages shorter and structured like a TV pilot. So I think, and same for something that should be a stage play. Or I saw the stage play Danny and the Deep Blue Sea by a Tony-winning playwright, and he adapted his own play into a screenplay, and the screenplay sucks because that story is a play. You know what I mean? So I think when you generate your story and your characters, figure out what form, screen, TV, stage, YouTube, TikTok, I don't care, whatever fits that story the best, write it for that instead of trying to cram it into a feature or cram, a feature into a TV pilot or a TV pilot for some reason into a stage play. So use the form to help enhance the story.
Great. All right. Roy had a question, right? Yes.
Does Talon Entertainment have readers that do coverage for you guys, or what's your process to make sure that you get a chance to read the scripts on your desk?
Yeah, so very candidly, the way scripts come to us now are through our relationships at CAA, WME, and also 3 Arts, who's my managers. And they, amongst them, they have very broad reach, right? So periodically, more than I want them to, they'll send me a long email with a bunch of scripts attached, and basically the breakdown of the info they send along is the title, the log line, producers, directors, cast attached, and if there is any financing information, something about that, and maybe when and where they're hoping to shoot for each of them, right, in this long email. And I choose from that, right, because I think I told you one of these months, I think 2 months ago, I got 75, and these are scripts from WGA nominated, like from, working writers who've been working a lot. I just don't have time to read 75, and I'm also not going to hire readers to read 75 because that, to me, is a waste of money. I'm going to pick the ones that seem the most interesting to me based on the information they chose to convey to me, because they got to choose what they convey to me, right? And whatever 10 those are, I'm going to read all of them. I do share them with Tony. I share them with Ava, who works with us, and maybe a couple people that I also know for input when I really like something, but we're still at the point where Talon's my baby, so I'm reading everything we're going to do.
Yeah, and it's hard because when there's a stack of, a virtual stack, because they're all in a folder on my Google Drive, basically, of screenplays to read, anything Steve sends me, since he's my boss technically, I will read because it's my job to do it. And he's already vetted it, right? It's already come from an agency to Steve, and then he's like, we should read this one and see what's going on. So then I'll read it and we'll talk about it and whatever else. But then there are a lot of others that come through. And if it's a friend of mine, somebody that I know, and be like, hey, will you check this out?
Sure.
And here's what I've got, then I'll read it. Or even if it's somebody who's sort of an acquaintance, but I know them and I know they've made stuff or whatever it is, and they want to send something. And what's super important for me to look at is, that summary thing, but if they'll send a pitch deck, I'll scroll through the pitch deck quickly, be like, all right, let me look at the pitch deck. It's 10 pages, it's pictures with a little bit of text, and I get a sense from it, like, oh, this seems interesting, I'll check this out.
So I do want to circle back a little. I don't only read 10 things that those agencies and managers send me. I try to limit to that, right? Because along with those, they are vetted. These are all people that the industry as an entity has some vested interest in somewhere, some way. So there's at least some support somewhere. That said, I really like the idea of working with first-time filmmakers. So I do try and find that, but it comes through referrals, right? Like this writer, I'm about to do one with, or about to read one, right? Or have a call about this one I liked called Words Fail. And it's just, this guy has been the second AD for this company, this reputable production company I know. And he's just second AD'd a lot of their projects. And so he got to know them and they trust him and he shared it with them and they dug it. And they're like, well, this seems like Steve's style. So they shared it with me. So it's just like this guy that I've never met, not through any big agency, but through somebody I know, right? And that's the only way we can take them. In truth, I get, I'm not exaggerating, although it will seem like it, maybe 80 to 120 unsolicited scripts a month in my email, because I stupidly have my email very accessible. I delete every single one for 2 reasons. One, I don't know this person. I have too much to read already from people I do know and trust. And 2, and every other producer will tell you this, you're constantly worried about being sued. If you read it and engage and then don't, they're like, well, this idea sort of was my idea, and sort of, and so I want no part of that. So I don't mess with them.
Yeah, it's hard, and I have kind of I've got a Word doc with a copy and paste email that I'll send to people that is basically that says, and this is, I'm not going to be discouraging. I'll circle back around to a somewhat encouraging aspect here, is that that it says basically, hey, thanks for sending me an email. We've got a full slate through 2025. We're not really looking at anything right now. Best of luck with the project, kind of thing, and send. That way, I'm so used to, when I worked as a film commissioner, responding to every single person. I feel bad if I don't at least try and respond, even if the response comes 2 weeks later or something like that, because you're just busy. It's just hard to read everything that comes in, and it's a long way of saying that there are no readers. Steve and I are the readers for stuff that comes in, and there are things that we want to get to. And that being said, sometimes randomly somebody will send their thing and it's a little thing, and sometimes I'll just look at the pitch deck, sometimes I won't. And there was like a really interesting one from Australia that had all this stuff lined up, and he's like, I've got this tax credit, I got this, and I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. And that was a cold thing that, I haven't even talked to Steve about because I haven't really had time to do that. But like 1 out of 100 that came in that was like that. But for the most part, you just don't have time for these cold, unsolicited.
Sure. I do want to circle back to, so it's all about how you say it. Like the ones I just deleted are like what he described as script. I need this $1 million. I haven't had a budget made, but I know it's $4 million I need. Like those are deleted immediately. This Thursday, so I'm in New York Wednesday to Fridays. This Thursday I'm having coffee with just some person who cold messaged me on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, your this is really interesting. I'm trying to do this. I'll be around the area, on these days, and I would love to buy you coffee. And I try to do that when I can. And it was just a nice, sweet, didn't ask for anything except like, do you have 30 minutes to have coffee, which I'm going to drink anyway. So for sure. And people have done that for me, right? So as long as you're not asking for something like inappropriate, people are willing to spend time and help and share. You just have to understand what that is. Right?
A lot of it's the approach. And when I was as film commissioner in 2 different areas for 10 years, I can't even count the number of coffee meetings I've had with people just wanting to talk about their projects and how you could potentially get it made, and advice and things like that. Which is part of the reason we do these workshops, because I don't have time to do 8 coffee meetings a day, 5 days a week. So you just don't have time.
It's
so
not healthy.
No.
It's too much coffee.
Yeah. And how many people can I talk to in a room at one time? Can we film it, and can we put it up so that I can now send people the link and say, I'm sorry, I don't have time, but I did this just for you. Watch this video and it'll explain some things.
Yeah, but it's the approach for sure. And I think like the most valuable thing that helped me, and I have a really concrete example of why, and maybe we do a question or two, whatever it is, offer to solve somebody's problems and don't ask for payment or a return on that, right? Like just do it because you're playing the long game, and helping somebody achieve their goal or dream is nice. An example of that was, or an example of just kind of pitching in and not asking for anything back, or doing something you don't think needs to be what you're doing. When we were shooting Bookworm in New Zealand, my role in that was we were producing and we fully financed it. So I went to set, day 2, 60% of the team has COVID. Like everybody is sick, Elijah, everybody. The DP was directing his camera from a van with a megaphone. It was a disaster. So for 5 days, I served Crafty because Crafty got sick. So I served soup to the crew. And then for the next 3 days, I was on props. And I did it with a smile, right? Because everybody's there sick and working their asses off for us. And it wasn't like, we didn't do it as like, here's the soup from your producer. We're like, are you hungry? And taking care of them. And we did what we could to make them comfortable, given how horrible the conditions turned out to be. And it paid off. Like the film is beautiful. They all had a great experience. They've asked to work together again. And some of them have sent me script, right? Like you just go and do for people in like a kind way, and don't worry about when it comes back, because I do think it does.
And I think we've discussed this, at some point in the future, once we're able to grow a little bit more, we'll move beyond just projects coming from agencies to be able to produce, because we do, as independent filmmakers at heart, we want to support the independent film community. Obviously, I've done that for forever as a film commissioner and with the film festival, and we'll find a way to be able to support those up-and-coming filmmakers as well. And we actually are already doing that with Eastern Western.
Yeah, Eastern Western. This woman, Biliana, was a great doc filmmaker, and she went out and hustled and made a Western for $400,000, but that $400,000 is value. The actual, like, a lot of that was dollar amounts she attached to donations, like in-kind services. She didn't spend more than, I don't know the number, right? But the 400 was a fraction of that is what she actually spent. And she made it, and then she was like, shoot, I can't get the finishing, the color finishing donated, and then I can't get it out to festivals and whatever without some money. And so she came through Tony, she came to us and was like, will you help me finish my film? So we watched it, and it's great. And all she's missing is like the polish, and then somebody able to bring it around to buyers. So that's what we stepped in and did, and are doing.
It just premiered at Mill Valley Film Festival out in California, which is a big festival and a very good one. It's going to be at New Orleans Film Festival coming up here. And
today I got a list of 15 buyers that said they would take a look at it, from Utopia all the way down to Neon, who will pass, but at least they'll look at it.
Yeah, and with no-name actors in the film. But they shot it in Montana. There's a real bear.
There's a real bear
in the movie. I still haven't asked her. I haven't got an answer how they got the bear. You need
drugs.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's not a cocaine bear. It's a Valium bear.
Oh, a
so it made it much easier to work with.
Yeah. Smart.
That was a long answer to that question.
Yeah, I know. I love my voice.
Since we've established that sending unsolicited scripts is pretty cringe, how do we get in touch with the agents that you guys actually want to hear from, that producers want to hear from? How can we establish relationships with them and get noticed by those people?
That's always the big question. How do I get an agent?
Yeah, I have an opinion. Other writers. I think writers like to help writers because although the dollars that go to films are kind of competitive, like your script, your horror film and my rom-com aren't competing against each other, right? Like they're not at odds. And I've found writers to be a really supportive group. And so just doing that outreach and starting to build kind of your community of writers, when one of you succeeds, they will reference others. And point in case, I found myself with Talon and signed at 3 Arts, and the first thing I did, before ever taking out any of my scripts to try and sell or anything like that, I had a classmate in the MFA program named Kaylee who wrote this really disgusting horror script, like in a good way, like really intelligent and thoughtful. And I optioned it and told them, like, you need to look at this, meet Kaylee. I wanted, like, this is good. I want to make it. And I'm going to try to make it here in Tampa, actually, because I'm trying to bring work here. And that's just, like, we went to school together, and one of us had the ability, but I know how great she is, and I saw a chance where they were looking for something I haven't written. So I was like, I don't have the horror script you asked for, but she does. You should read it. So I think that's probably the simplest way, the most organic way. Maybe not the simplest, but the most organic way is meet the writers. And then spend time with managers too, because think pragmatically, how do managers make a living? They make it off of their writers making money. So they need to find that next writer who's going to break big, right? Otherwise they don't eat. So they do want to meet you guys. It's just about the approach, right? And not showing up as if you have everything to give them and they would be lucky to have it. It's the approach. But they will, be bold, and you can go on IMDb Pro if you get that account for $10 a month, whatever it is. Pick on my managers. Go to 3 Arts and just start clicking on managers. A lot of their emails are just right there. They're not hidden. Many of them are agents too, just right there. And reach out and say, hey, this is me. I'm a writer. I'm in town. Can I buy you coffee? Some will say yes, some will say no, and that's great.
Yeah,
the one other difference to learn ahead of time too is what a manager does and what an agent does, because they won't meet with you. Just like if the screenplay shows up riddled with grammar errors, they won't take the time for somebody who hasn't taken the time to know what they do, which is a shocking amount of time.
And I think, to kind of expand on that a little bit too, part of the question then becomes, well, where do I meet these writers that are having things produced, and what do I do? And that's where always film festivals come in. Austin Film Festival is known as a writers' film festival. That's where writers and, managers that represent writers hang out, and it's very writer-focused. So, look for festivals like that are writer-focused. There are a lot of the labs, like Steve was talking about, like Sundance Lab and Stowe Storytellers Lab, and so there's a lot of these different labs, Film Independent, that those are things you can cold submit screenplays to. Certain screenplay competitions, there are a lot of screenplay competitions, and they don't necessarily mean anything as far as a competition goes. It's like, I won this competition, which is great. I've never heard of this competition, but that's great or whatever. So sometimes people get representation from competitions as well. I know Screencraft, I've talked about them before. I was a top 5% finalist with a screenplay in one of their competitions. And then once you do that, they're like, hey, we're going to set you up with this person, and we can set you up then to talk to a manager. And it was one of those things for this particular project. It's like, well, I kind of already have the things in place that I need to. I don't really need somebody for this one. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. You just kind of have to find the way. It's not the same path for everybody, whether that's, like I said, going to festivals, doing writers' labs, doing competitions. There's no one answer, but those are
There's
several
also
options.
no clear answer, which is depressing, but it also is just how it is, right? And that's why the people who make it aren't always the best. They're the most tenacious, right? And they in the right approach, but I don't even remember what the actual aphorism, right? But like basically if 30 people start together, like the 4 who make it are just the 4 who didn't quit in this business, right? It's like you have to be doing the job and practicing and getting better, but ultimately there is some attrition. So if you're in the right places and meeting the right people, and I think being honest and transparent, like that will matter. Because I go on, like even when the panels aren't on the topic, I'm always talking about people misrepresenting like the state of their film. Like they'll ask, they only need $2 more million and they have a Marvel star attached. And it turns out the film's budget is $2 million total, although they've never had a budget done. And also the Marvel star attached is a friend of a friend who their friend said would probably like it. Like that's not what being attached means. And then that person is dead to me. So I think just approaching things like earnest does pay off. Even if it feels like it doesn't, it does pay off because the people who respond to you are responding to you for real. And that's stickier than like the nonsense, networky, blah, blah, blah.
And it's just such a super competitive industry, right? Like aside from, I don't know, professional sports, like what else has such a high barrier to entry? There's probably something
it's
else.
weird because
startup companies, I don't know. It's just it's hard, right?
But it's weird because it has no barrier to entry to be a writer, right? Like if you have a laptop or a paper and pen, you can be a writer. So many people are, which makes it hard for the signal to come through the noise, right? For the good to make its way through the bad is that everybody can do it and so many people do. And so I get 120 emails of, like poorly formatted and misspelled scripts. And maybe in there's 2 that are just really good. And I won't see them because of that. You know what I mean? So I think in some ways it's a high barrier to entry because the actual physical, like anybody can do it. Anybody can sit down and do it. Not well, but I can do it.
All right, more questions. Let's see who we haven't not gotten to yet. Don't think you or you yet either.
One of the things I heard back in the day when I went to film school was that your first 10 films is going to be garbage. Is that, in your personal experiences, correct, or is this something that's never been true, or maybe
Your
people are
first
getting better?
10? That seems like a lot to be like, if you can't get
Quentin Tarantino's made 9.
Are your first 10 features? Or are you talking about your first 10 shorts or just first
features? 10? Yeah, features.
Wow, I don't know. I don't know who says that.
I can't.
If that's the case,
When's the last time he made a good one, though? And he's well past 10. I don't know. I don't think that's true. I think you have to make some bad things. Like if you're writing, like you have to write some stuff that's not great, right? And better comes out. But to put a number on it is crazy, right? Like I think people whose first feature is amazing, it's not the first script they wrote. They've been writing stories and short stories and scripts and pilots or plays since they were young, right? Like, and it seems like it's overnight, but it isn't. But to put any arbitrary number on it, I think is nuts.
How many are you up to? Have you done 10 yet?
No, I'm not done.
No, not yet. You're good then. You're all right.
I don't know. Producing wise, we got into Cannes on our second film, so like that was luck. You know what I mean? We got to do O Canada, that's it, Cannes, because I happened to know the producer and they ran out of money during the shoot, and they were like, "Who will say yes easily?" And then it was me, but because of that, we've built all those relationships, like, and we've wrung the value out of it, right? Like we were like, okay, here's what we added in value wise, and that's come back to us, but. I wasn't a good producer who chose the great project. That was just, they ran out of cash, and I was standing there with a bucket of money.
You had a question right here? Yeah. You're not going to ask us if we have to shoot 10 films, right?
No.
Okay.
So how you've mentioned the labs that you said it's more acceptable to cold submit to. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little more about those labs, like as somebody who is completely unfamiliar.
Yeah, the labs aren't like an agency or anything. The labs are just kind of what they sound like. It's an experimental thing where they want your cold submissions. You have to pay for it sometimes. Like there's a fee, like pay $50 or whatever it is to submit to these labs.
Often labs are the result. They're the prize for a contest, right? And what they are basically writers groups, where 10 of you get in and you workshop your writing to each other with some screenwriter or whatever writer is kind of your Sherpa, as your, your guide and teacher through that. And maybe they bring in other guests relevant to whichever kind of lab it is, screen, stage, TV, whatever. But 95% of the time, they take the form of a workshop where you and your peers are reading your stuff out loud, giving comments, giving feedback, going away, writing some stuff, coming back. And they're all some version of that.
And they're building relationships in the labs is the
Right.
big part of it. Like,
It's a great way to meet writers.
and somebody comes out of the Sundance lab is like, my script was in the Sundance lab. People are like, oh, it was. I'm interested in looking at that to potentially finance it now. And that's why the labs are important, and you'll see that a lot. It's a lot of times if a script ends up in a Sundance lab and then it gets made, it ends up in Sundance because it's in their ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. True.
Well, back to Kyle after here.
My question is there a way to protect your ideas or your scripts or whatever that you're pitching or you're in these labs and things like that?
Yeah, I have opinions on this.
There's really only one legal way to protect it.
Copywriting.
Yeah. Copyright.gov.
Yeah.
And it's like $80.
That's the simplest way, right? The WGA thing's nice, but not legally that strong. The copyright is. That said, almost nobody's going to steal your idea. There's a few charlatans out there who are keeping me from saying nobody. But in reality, no idea I've had is worth somebody's time and the risk to them to steal, knowing that I could find out and bring them down later. It's not. That's why I don't even read these unsolicited scripts, so that you can't even consider the possibility of us having stolen it. It's just no above board professional would do that. And if they're not above board and do it, you can sue them and they'll lose, right? So I think it's a worry. You can copyright things when they're done, and you should. It's part of the process of getting a film made. You have to have all your legal ducks in a row. But I think in practice, you don't actually have to worry about it. I mean, the Charlie Kaufman thing was sent. I didn't sign an NDA. I probably shouldn't have said I read it, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to steal that idea. So I think it's a worry people have, but it's not something that happens that much. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I hate them.
I think, and again, I think it's different from when in this world, because if somebody sends me an NDA, says, hey, will you sign this NDA before you read my script? I say no.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, nah.
I'm not going to do that. And what that shows me is that you don't know what you're doing.
There's a lot of stuff, I will say this, I've learned over the past few years, like there's a lot of things in this particular industry that are strange, because I get that, right? Like when I was at hedge funds or whatever, I signed an NDA to go to lunch with certain people. Like it was really, he gets me. It's like that. In this, it's the opposite for what I just said, but even with 3 Arts, my managers, when we sell something, I owe them 10%, right? I signed nothing. Like I'm their client, I've signed no paperwork. If I don't send them 10%, they won't be my managers anymore. It's like, that's what it's on. And when I did that was my first time I was represented when I got them. And I was like coming straight from finance, and I was like, where's the paperwork? Let's get this done. And they shook my hand. They're like, we're done. And I was like, I'm very uncomfortable with this. But it's just one of the quirks of the business is there's no paperwork on those things.
Now, there is paperwork once you start making your movie. There's a
Yes.
lot of paperwork and legal paperwork before it can get distributed and everything else. But kind of from the screenplay stage of like protecting your idea.
Yeah, I think if it's finished, copyright it. if you want, why not, right? You're going to have to anyway. To have it made, it's part of the deliverables required to get the financing to show up. Like when we're financing a film, I don't send money somewhere if I don't know for certain that we own the screenplay. So it's part of it, but in due time. You don't have to stress about that, I think, at the beginning.
I do have a great stealing story, though, that I'll tell really quick. So there's a filmmaker that I know that made this really great short film, and it was on the film festival circuit and everything else, and then when it was done, he threw it up on YouTube, and he received a phone call one day from somebody at a studio and said, hey, this feature film, or this short film, blah, 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 you made this, right? And the filmmaker was like, yeah, of course I made this. And the guy on the other line, and I'm leaving names and everything out as well because this story isn't public yet because they're going to make this thing. He said, well, somebody else took your short film, edited your name out of the short film, put their name in as director, and then presented it as their work. And we, Studio ABC, are going to make it as a $10 million feature film. And so now, because this person stole his film, it would have never gotten to Studio ABC. And the guy that stole it is, of course, out and essentially blackballed the industry. And the person who had no idea his film was being looked at by big studio is going to make this large feature film because some idiot thought that they could. I don't understand how you could even think you could get away with that.
I don't know.
Hey, what's it like working with this particular actor? What was this like working on set? Like, you start asking basic questions about the shoot or about the idea or how it came about. Like, how do you answer those when you literally just
let's
put
say
your name over the
it's
top?
so short-sighted too. Like he makes it, yay, but when he tries to have another idea, he doesn't have any. Right? It's like putting on your resume, like I speak French, and then you show up on your first day of work. They're like, we need you to translate this French, and you're like, that's a problem for me. like you're not going to stay at that job for a long time. So I don't know. It's really short-sighted.
So even though somebody's work got stolen, it actually worked out better for them in the long run because the person who stole it was just clearly a complete moron. Might be a good way to end this after one more question, and we'll go from there.
Hi. Sorry we're late. We actually just flew back from Boston, and it was a mess.
I know you didn't fly down just for this from Boston.
Actually, yeah, we kind of did.
But you live here.
Yeah, we live here, yeah.
Yes.
So I'm not sure this has covered the distinction between a screenwriter who wants to, the hyphen, and wants to direct their script, and the screenwriter who wants to sell their script. I'm a screenwriter and also a script consultant. And when I work with clients, obviously, encourage them to have the best possible script they can and to write it for the executive reader, whether manager, producer. If they're just looking to sell it, if they're looking to sell it, do you want them to know or have an idea what the budget would be? Is that a good thing if they know, okay, I'm seeing something in the $2 to $5 million range, for example?
No, if it's just a writer like that's not intending to direct or produce, like if they're just trying to sell the script, I would want them to know in their heads like what they think it would cost to make, even if it's just really rough. So they pick a producer who makes films in that budget range. Sure. But they just wrote it. They don't need to know what it actually costs. I was just kind of pushing against like the writer-producer who's like, my film costs $8 million based on what? And it's never anything because they've never had a line producer do that budget. Right. But for just that case, no way. They don't need to. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's always amusing when somebody says, this is my $5 million film. I was like, well, why does it cost $5 million? Because, again, they've never had anybody break it down. They just assume that this is a number that this could be made
$3
for.
$3 million.
Right. Well, exactly. It's basically how much you have to pay the actors, and then that will determine what your film costs. And actually, I said this in the last workshop, was your film costs exactly what somebody's willing to give you for it. So if someone will only give you $100, that's what your film costs.
See, I think a film costs 20% less than whatever somebody will pay me for it when I'm done with it. That's actually part of how we do our math, right? Like when we're trying to figure out, like, is this the right is $5 million the right budget for a film? The answer is yes, if I think the market will pay $6 million for it, right? And if I think they'll pay $4.5 million, then it's not the right budget for the film. And the two options are don't make the film or make a version of the film that costs $4 million and figure out what that changes in terms of the actual physical production of it and see if we can get to that number. Because we've definitely backwards. We did it for this White Horse film.
You always do. And so
Yeah.
if you go to YouTube or the FMX UT page, you can watch the workshop I did last week where we break all this down and we do all the finance aspect of it and why things cost a certain amount and the 20% less and everything else.
Nice.
You would have enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
You already know it all, so. Okay. One last question. This will be the last one, and then we'll wrap it up. Connor.
All right.
Better be a good one, Connor.
So I'm curious so when you guys receive a script from, let's say, a friend, like you're doing a script exchange or something like that, when you're reading this person's script, how do you go about figuring out what you like, what you don't like, and giving them feedback that is actionable and usable, as opposed to, I didn't like that, or something like that?
What you're talking about, like constructive coverage on a screenplay, basically.
Yeah.
Do you want it?
I mean,
either way.
yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. I do it a lot. Like with the group of writers from my MFA, they're the people outside of our team that I'll show things to. But even then, just to drill on this, like I won't show a rom-com to a friend of mine from that group who writes horror stuff. You know what I mean? Like I figure out who the right person is first and only ask that person. So that seems to be a trend of things I've said in all areas, like wisely choose who your counterparty is. But in terms of what I'm looking for, it's just the basic tenets of story, I guess. Like, are the characters complex and compelling? Do they change sufficiently, like from beginning to end? Is the pacing correct? You know what I mean? Like, does it feel like it took 3 hours to read a 90-minute script? Things like that. So oftentimes when I read something, my feedback is a lot about motivations. Like, I don't get why Claire would do this here. She said this before. Why is she, she said she hates apples and now she's making, apple juice homemade. Like, that makes no sense. So is it like character motivation? I don't really make like dialogue edits, like, and say like, this is too expository or not. I just don't have the time for that. But so I think motivation, pacing,
I know I'll read something and be like, why did nothing happen between page 20 and 35? Like, I felt like this took a year and the characters didn't do anything and there was no forward progress. Or this was reading like one story and then when you get to page 80, it flipped to a completely different type of genre or story here. I'm not sure what's happening. And like you said with character, like why did this character do this? Why are they so obsessed with this one thing that has nothing to do with the rest of the story? It's just those little things that when you're reading, a lot of it are logic questions, right? Like, why is this way? Why did you do this way? And if you have an answer for it, but it's not in the screenplay, well, it's like, well, why didn't you put that in the screenplay? Or somehow explain that to a certain extent. So there's a variety of different kind of things, but you just kind of look at it, like Steve said, from a storytelling perspective. Is this story, and if the dialogue is really bad, you're like, I don't believe that these characters would speak this way because it's so.
I would say that, but I wouldn't be like, they should say this. I would just be like, the dialogue's tough because it feels like you're just telling me what they need me to hear instead of what they would say in that situation.
Because people speak in subtext, and so many, especially new writers, write exactly what the character's thinking when people don't say what they think.
We have to go to the store to get that thing. Yeah, versus I'm hungry, or whatever. I don't know. But point is, I look at it in terms
and
of
here's a little
pacing.
here's a little bit of a cheat for you that nobody's going to like to hear, but you can actually drop your screenplay into ChatGPT and ask for coverage, and it will give you coverage on it and like break it down, and it's not bad. I know.
I refuse to put anything on camera about this.
I know. I'm just saying it's not bad. It could be better. But if you dropped it in 10 different times and asked for coverage 10 different times, you probably get 10 different coverages.
So I'm going to put something on camera about it.
Okay, go ahead.
AI right now is really good at data and logic and that kind of thing. So if you ask it, is it paced correct? Or did I mention a ticking bomb in scene 2 and forget about it? It can answer those things really quick, right? Like, yes, you had 14 pages of dialogue in the middle of this that don't seem to relate to anything else. You should address that. It's really good at that. But I have also messed around with it and been like, here's my current script that's unfinished, and here are my last 10 I wrote. Write me the next scene in this unfinished one, and it's just garbage. It's so far away from being creative that maybe someday we can stress about it, but right now, don't stress about its creative capabilities. But its logic capabilities are strong.
From a creative standpoint, yeah, it's horrible. But you could use it for little things like, hey, here is give me the story structure. Give me the Save the Cat story structure for this screenplay that I wrote. And it'll spit it back and be like, page 1, you have this happen, page 5, you have this happen, page 17. Sure. And it'll tell you what the structure is, and then you can take a look at that and kind of compare your structure. And so for those kind of nuts and bolts, like architectural type things,
I use it as a versioning software, to be candid. I use it as a versioning software. So every time I finish a draft, I dump it in and have it in its memory. And then as I go on, I'll go back and say, because I'll forget, like it's hard to keep all this in your mind. I'll be like, does Dawn go to the store with Sly in this version? And it'll be like, no, you got rid of that 2 versions ago. And I'm like, shit, I need that back. And then I know how to go mess with it. But it can look across all those versions so much faster than I can. But that's really just quick Google. You know what I mean? Like personal quick Google is what I use it for.
Yeah, I honestly use it for Googling stuff now instead of Google, because it gives you
really
the answer right away instead of having to scrub through 5,000 things. I know we're off topic a little bit here.
No, let's keep talking about ChatGPT.
But the point is, from a screenwriting perspective, you're not going to use it to write anything, but you could potentially use it mechanically, even if you're trying to give yourself the outline that everybody hates writing and be like, here's my idea, my jumbly ideas, can you help me outline this in Save the Cat story structure, whatever it might be, and it can help you put an outline together that then maybe you can then write a little bit. There's different ways of doing things that are not writing, but will help you write, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Yeah. It's a hammer.
Sure.
All right. I think that's it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.